The radio crackled with static and desperation. "Falcon Base, this is Bravo 6. We are compromised. I repeat, we are compromised." Lieutenant Commander Marcus Reaper Davidson's voice carried the weight of 23 years in special operations, but today it trembled with something he'd never felt before: helplessness. The SEAL team was pinned down in the narrow valley of Khost Province, Afghanistan, surrounded by Taliban fighters who had turned their extraction point into a killing field. Above the chaos, at 37,000 feet, Captain Valentina "Ghost" Kozlova adjusted her oxygen mask and scanned the tactical display in her lightning eye. The sleek fighter jet cut through the thin atmosphere like a silver blade, its stealth coating making it nearly invisible to enemy radar. She'd been circling for 47 minutes, watching the drama unfold below through her electro-optical targeting system. "Ghost, this is Falcon Base," came the voice of Colonel James Hartwell, the mission commander who tried to ground her 3 times in the past year. "You are not authorized for close air support. Repeat, you are not cleared hot." Valentina's jaw tightened beneath her helmet. Down in that valley, 8 of America's finest warriors were about to die, and the brass was worried about paperwork. She could see the muzzle flashes through her targeting pod, could count the Taliban positions scattered across the rocky terrain. The SEALs had taken cover behind a crashed helicopter, but their ammunition was running low. "Bravo 6, what's your status?" She transmitted directly to the team leader, bypassing command protocol. "Ghost, is that you?" Davidson's relief was audible even through the static. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before they overrun us. Where's our air support?" Valentina glanced at her fuel gauge. Enough for 1 pass, maybe 2 if she pushed it. The F-35's internal weapons bay carried 2 AIM-120 AMRAAMs and a single GBU-32 JDAM. Not much firepower against an entire Taliban cell, but it would have to be enough. "Falcon Base, this is Ghost. I'm declaring an emergency situation and taking control of this airspace." "Negative, Ghost. You are ordered to return to base immediately." She switched off her radio to command frequency and focused on the SEAL's channel. Through her helmet's advanced display, she could see Davidson's heat signature pressed against the wreckage. The enemy was closing in from 3 sides, their AK-47s chattering like angry insects. "Bravo 6, this is your guardian angel. I need you to mark your position with infrared strobes and get ready to move on my signal." "Copy that, Ghost. You're a sight for sore eyes." If only he knew she was the pilot they called Washout Kozlova behind her back, the Ukrainian immigrant who'd supposedly lost her edge after a training accident 2 years ago. Today, she'd prove them all wrong. The valley waited below, shrouded in morning shadows that would soon run red with blood. Valentina pushed the throttle forward and began her descent into hell. The F-35 screamed through the mountain air at Mach 1.2, its Pratt & Whitney engine generating enough thrust to power a small city. Valentina's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, her fingers dancing over switches that would determine whether 8 American heroes lived or died. The advanced pilot helmet fed her a stream of data, target locations, wind speed, ammunition count, but she trusted her instincts more than any computer. "Bravo 6, I count 17 tangos converging on your position. You've got a clear escape route to the north, but I need to clear the ridge line first." "Roger that, Ghost. We're ready to move on your mark." 3,000 feet below, Taliban fighters scrambled across the rocky terrain, their RPGs and machine guns trained on the downed helicopter. They thought they had the Americans trapped like rats in a barrel. They had no idea death was diving toward them at 600 miles per hour. Valentina selected her GBU-32 JDAM, a 1,000-pound smart bomb that could level a city block. The targeting computer locked onto the largest concentration of enemy fighters, painting them with an invisible laser designator. Her finger hovered over the release button as she pulled into a steep dive, the G-forces pressing her deep into her ejection seat. Fox 3, Fox 3. She released the bomb and immediately pulled up, her vision graying as the aircraft pulled nearly 8 GS in the climb. The JDAM fell like a meteor, its GPS guidance system adjusting the fins to maintain perfect accuracy despite the mountain winds. The explosion lit up the valley like a second sunrise. Rock and debris fountained hundreds of feet into the air as the bomb detonated precisely where she'd aimed it. Through her helmet display, she watched thermal signatures, human lives, simply vanish in the blast. "Holy shit, Ghost, that was danger close." Davidson's voice carried new respect. "You just took out half their force." But Valentina wasn't finished. Banking hard to the left, she spotted 3 Taliban fighters with an RPG-7 who'd survived the blast. They were repositioning to target the SEAL's escape route. She armed her 25 MGAU-22 cannon, a rotary gun that could fire 3,300 rounds per minute. "Bravo 6, keep your heads down. I'm making a strafing run." The F-35 dove again, this time at a shallower angle. Valentina lined up the cannon's targeting reticle with the enemy position and squeezed the trigger. The gun roared to life, spitting armor-piercing shells at the enemy fighters. The rocky ground erupted in clouds of dust and sparks as the high-explosive rounds found their marks. When the smoke cleared, the Taliban position was silent. "Ghost, this is Bravo 6. Path is clear. We're moving to extraction point Charlie." Valentina climbed back to altitude, her fuel gauge showing critical levels. She'd used everything, bombs, bullets, and nearly all her JP-8 fuel. But the SEALs were alive, and that was all that mattered. Colonel Davidson's voice came through her headset, softer now, almost reverent. "Ghost, I don't know how to thank you. You saved our lives down there." She thought of her father, killed defending Kiev when she was 12. She thought of the American taxpayers who'd funded her training, the fellow pilots who doubted her abilities, the sleepless nights wondering if she was good enough. "Just doing my job, Bravo 6, welcome home." Back at Bagram Airfield, the F-35 touched down with fumes in its tanks and bullet holes in its left wing, evidence of ground fire she hadn't even noticed during the engagement. As Valentina climbed down from the cockpit, her legs shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion, she found Colonel Hartwell waiting on the tarmac. His face was unreadable behind his aviator sunglasses, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. She disobeyed direct orders, engaged without authorization, and expended military assets without approval. In the rigid hierarchy of the Air Force, those were career-ending offenses. "Captain Kozlova," he said formally, using her real name instead of her call sign. "You're grounded pending investigation." She removed her helmet, her dark hair plastered to her scalp with sweat. "Yes, sir, I understand." But as she walked toward the debriefing room, her crew chief, Staff Sergeant William Wrench Rodriguez, called out from behind her aircraft. "Ma'am, you might want to see this." Painted on the side of her F-35, barely visible against the gray stealth coating, were 8 small marks, tally marks, each one representing a life saved, a family that would see their warrior come home. Wrench had painted them there while the engines were still cooling, his tribute to a pilot who'd risked everything for her brothers in arms. Word spread through the base faster than wildfire. By evening chow, every airman, soldier, and contractor knew the story. The Ukrainian pilot who'd gone rogue to save a SEAL team. The woman they'd called Washout had just pulled off one of the most daring close air support missions in recent memory. In the officers' club that night, Lieutenant Commander Davidson found her sitting alone at the bar, staring at an untouched beer. His dress uniform was crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the blood-stained fatigues he'd worn that morning. "Mind if I join you, Ghost?" She gestured to the empty stool beside her. Up close, she could see the stress lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands that came from too much combat and not enough sleep. "Hell of a thing you did today," he said quietly. "My boys want to buy you a drink." I appreciate that, but I'll probably be flying a desk after this. Davidson studied her profile. The sharp cheekbones inherited from her Slavic ancestors, the scar above her left eyebrow from the training accident that had supposedly ended her career as a frontline pilot. "You know what they're calling you now?" he asked. She shook her head. "Angel of the Valley. My team's been talking about it all evening. You want to know what real warriors think about what you did today?" Through the window, Valentina could see her F-35 parked on the flight line, surrounded by maintenance crews working under floodlights. Tomorrow it would be repaired, refueled, and ready for another mission. But would she be the one flying it? "What do you think, Commander?" "I think you're exactly the kind of pilot I want covering my six." The investigation lasted 3 weeks. During that time, Valentina spent her days in briefing rooms and her evenings walking the perimeter of Bagram, watching other pilots take off on missions she should have been flying. The F-35 squadron continued their operations without her, but something had changed in the way her fellow aviators looked at her. Major Sarah "Viper" Chen, who'd once made jokes about Valentina's accent during briefings, now nodded respectfully when they passed in the corridors. Captain James "Bulldog" Morrison, who'd questioned her nerve after the training accident, asked her opinion on close air support tactics. Even the maintenance crews treated her differently, with the quiet reverence reserved for pilots who'd been tested in combat and proven themselves worthy. The turning point came when footage from a Taliban propaganda video surfaced on intelligence networks. The video, intended to show their successful ambush of American forces, instead captured the moment when Valentina's JDAM struck their position. The explosion was so precise, so devastating, that it became required viewing at the Air Force Weapons School. Her targeting solution was textbook perfect, a 1-in-a-million shot that had eliminated 17 enemy combatants without endangering a single friendly force. Colonel Hartwell called her to his office on a Thursday morning. The walls were lined with photographs of fighter aircraft from decades past, F-4 Phantoms over Vietnam, Warthogs above Iraq, F-16 Falcons patrolling no-fly zones, warriors who'd faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. "The investigation has concluded," he said without preamble. "No charges will be filed." Valentina felt her shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. The Pentagon is asking questions about our training protocols. How does a pilot we deemed high risk for frontline combat pull off a mission that's already being studied at the War College?" She thought about the answer for a long moment. "Sometimes, sir, you have to trust your instincts over regulations." Hartwell removed his glasses and polished them carefully. When he looked up, his expression had softened. "Captain Kozlova, I've been flying fighters for 28 years. I've seen hotshots crash and burn, and I've seen steady pilots become legends. You proved something in that valley that I've been too stubborn to recognize." "What's that, sir?" "That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's taking action despite that fear. Your file shows you requesting transfer to ground assignments after your accident. Why?" The memory came flooding back. The training exercise gone wrong, the bird strike that had killed her engines at 400 feet, the ejection sequence that had saved her life but shattered her confidence. She'd spent 18 months convinced she'd lost her edge, that she was a danger to herself and her squadron. "I thought I was broken, sir, that I couldn't be trusted in combat. And now—" Through the colonel's window, she could see the flight line where her F-35 waited, fully repaired and loaded with a fresh set of missiles. The crew chief had left the 8 tally marks on the fuselage, a reminder of the lives that hung in the balance every time a pilot climbed into that cockpit. "Now I know that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. Sometimes the strongest steel comes from the forge that burns the hottest." Hartwell smiled for the first time since she'd known him. "Captain, you're back on flight status, effective immediately." 6 months later, Valentina stood before a formation of young pilots at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. The Combat Training Squadron had invited her to speak about close air support operations, but she knew the real reason they'd asked her to come. Her story had become legend, the immigrant pilot who'd overcome doubt and adversity to save American lives. The student pilots looked impossibly young, their flight suits crisp and new, their faces eager and uncertain. She recognized that look, the hunger to prove themselves, the fear of not measuring up, the weight of representing something larger than themselves. "How many of you have been told you don't have what it takes?" she asked. Half the hands in the room went up. Women, minorities, first-generation Americans, kids from small towns who'd never seen a fighter jet until they'd enlisted. The faces of doubt and determination that had stared back at her from the mirror for so many years. "Good," she said, "because the day you stop doubting yourself is the day you stop growing. I want to tell you about a morning in Afghanistan when doubt saved 8 American lives." She told them about the radio call, the impossible tactical situation, the choice between following orders and following conscience. She spoke about fear and courage, about the weight of responsibility that came with wearing the wings of a military aviator. But most importantly, she talked about the moment when she'd stopped seeing herself as broken and started seeing herself as battle-tested. "Your call sign isn't just a nickname," she concluded. "It's a promise that when your brothers and sisters in arms need you most, you'll be there. Whether they're SEALs pinned down in a valley or pilots lost in a storm, you'll find a way to bring them home." After the briefing, a young lieutenant approached her, Maria Santos, barely 22, with the determined eyes of someone who'd fought for every opportunity she'd received. "Ma'am, I wanted to thank you for your story. I've been struggling with confidence issues since a training incident last month." Valentina saw herself in the young woman's face, the doubt, the fear, the desperate need to prove herself worthy of the trust placed in her. "What happened?" "Bird strike during low-level navigation. I had to eject. The accident investigation cleared me, but I keep second-guessing every decision I make in the cockpit." "Let me tell you something about bird strikes, Lieutenant. They don't ask for your permission, and they don't care about your flight plan. What matters is how you respond when everything goes wrong." She pulled out her phone and showed Santos a photograph. Her F-35 on the flight line at Bagram, with the 8 tally marks barely visible on the fuselage. "Those marks represent the most important lesson I've ever learned. It's not about being fearless. It's about being afraid and taking action anyway. The sky doesn't care about your doubts. It only cares about your decisions." Lieutenant Santos studied the photograph, her expression thoughtful. "How do I know if I'm making the right choice?" "You don't, but you make it anyway because 8 people are counting on you to get it right. And when you're sitting in that cockpit with the weight of other people's lives in your hands, you'll find strength you never knew you had." The young pilot saluted, a gesture of respect that still caught Valentina off guard after all these years. As Santos walked away, Valentina felt the familiar tug of purpose that had driven her to become a pilot in the first place. It wasn't about personal glory or career advancement. It was about the sacred trust between warriors, the unspoken promise that no one would be left behind. That evening, she called Lieutenant Commander Davidson, now retired and living in Colorado with his wife and daughters. His voice carried the warmth of a man who'd found peace after decades of war. "Ghost, how's the inspiring speech circuit treating you?" "Better than I expected. How's civilian life, Reaper?" "Quiet, sometimes too quiet, but I wake up every morning grateful for the chance to be bored." He paused, and she could hear children laughing in the background. "My girls want to meet you someday. They call you Daddy's Angel." The words hit her harder than she'd expected. She'd never thought of herself as anyone's angel, just a pilot doing her job, trying to live up to the standards set by those who'd come before her. "Tell them their daddy was the real hero that day. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. That's bullshit, and you know it. You made a choice that saved 8 lives. More than that, you showed an entire generation of pilots what courage looks like. After they hung up, Valentina stood on the balcony of her quarters, looking out at the Nevada desert. In the distance, she could see the lights of fighter jets practicing night intercepts, their pilots hunting skills they might never need but couldn't afford to lack. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Lieutenant Santos. "Ma'am, just wanted to let you know I had my check ride today. Passed with flying colors. Thank you for reminding me who I am." Attached was a photograph, Santos in her flight suit, standing beside an F-16 Fighting Falcon, her smile radiant with accomplishment and renewed confidence. It was the same expression Valentina remembered seeing in the mirror the day she'd been cleared to return to flight status. The circle was complete. The broken pilot had become the mentor, the doubter had become the inspiration, the washout had become the legend. But titles and reputations were temporary things, as fleeting as contrails in the desert sky. What mattered was the promise, spoken or unspoken, that when the radio crackled with desperation, when American warriors found themselves outgunned and outnumbered in some godforsaken valley on the other side of the world, someone would answer the call. Someone would find a way to bring them home. Years passed, and the legend of Ghost grew in the telling. New pilots learned her story during survival training, studying the tactical decisions that had turned a desperate situation into a textbook rescue. The footage from her helmet camera became required viewing at the Air Force Academy, dissected frame by eager cadets who dreamed of following in her contrails. But legends have a way of obscuring the human story beneath them. The official records showed a successful close air support mission, enemy casualties confirmed, friendly forces extracted without loss. They didn't mention the nightmares that followed, the weight of 17 lives taken to save 8, the impossible calculations that turned human beings into tactical decisions. Valentina transferred to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, where she joined the 53rd Test and Evaluation Group. Her job now was to push the boundaries of aircraft performance, to find the limits of what machines and pilots could endure. It was analytical work, sterile and controlled, far removed from the chaos of combat operations. She told herself she preferred it this way. No more life-or-death decisions made in seconds, no more radio calls pleading for salvation, no more young faces looking to her for answers she didn't have. Just data and flight parameters, stress tests and performance metrics. But late at night, when the Florida humidity made sleep impossible, she found herself standing outside her quarters, looking up at the stars and wondering if somewhere out there, American forces were pinned down in another valley, calling for an angel who might not come. The call came on a Tuesday morning in September. Captain Jennifer Phoenix Walsh, one of the pilots Valentina had mentored, was leading a combat air patrol over Syria when her wingman's F-22 Raptor developed hydraulic failure. The pilot, Lieutenant Mark "Rookie" Thompson, just 6 months out of training, was struggling to maintain control as his aircraft slowly bled altitude. "Eglin Base, this is Phoenix. I need to speak with Ghost immediately." Valentina was in the middle of reviewing test data when the call transferred to her office. Phoenix's voice carried the same mixture of professionalism and desperation she remembered from her own combat experiences. "Ghost, I've got a situation here. Rookie's bird is dying and we're 60 miles from the nearest friendly airfield. His hydraulics are gone and he's losing altitude fast." Through the secure video link, Valentina could see the tactical display showing both aircraft positions. Thompson's F-22 was descending in a shallow spiral, its pilot fighting to maintain control with backup systems that were never designed for sustained flight. "What's his experience level with emergency procedures?" "Minimal. This is his first deployment. He's scared, Ghost. I can hear it in his voice." Valentina closed her eyes and remembered her own first emergency, the bird strike that had ended her confidence and nearly ended her career. The paralysis of fear, the overwhelming complexity of emergency checklists, the terrible certainty that she was about to die. Patch me through to him directly. Rookie, this is Ghost. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The young pilot's voice crackled through the radio, tight with fear and fighting for control. Ma'am, I've tried everything in the book. Nothing's responding properly. Forget the book, son. The book doesn't know what it's like to be 60 miles from safety with a dying aircraft. I need you to trust your instincts and trust me. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. For the next 27 minutes, Valentina talked Lieutenant Thompson through the most difficult flight of his young career. She guided him through power settings that weren't in any manual, control inputs that defied conventional wisdom, and emergency procedures that existed only in the accumulated wisdom of pilots who'd faced similar situations and lived to tell about it. When his F-22 finally touched down at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, its landing gear extended by gravity alone, and its engines flamed out from fuel starvation, Thompson had become something different from the frightened young man who'd taken off that morning. He'd become a combat pilot. The debrief lasted 3 hours. Pentagon officials wanted to understand how a pilot with less than 200 flight hours had successfully landed a critically damaged fifth-generation fighter without loss of life or aircraft. The answer was simple but impossible to quantify. Experience shared across time and distance, the accumulated wisdom of pilots who'd faced their own impossible moments and found a way to survive. That night, Valentina received a call from General Patricia Morrison, the first woman to command Air Combat Command. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent 30 years proving herself in a male-dominated profession. Captain Kozlova, I've been watching your career for some time. Your actions in Afghanistan, your work with pilot training, and now this incident with Lieutenant Thompson. I have a proposition for you. Yes, ma'am. I'm creating a new position, Senior Advisor for Combat Pilot Development. Your job would be to identify pilots who show exceptional potential but struggle with confidence issues. Help them find their edge before they face their first real emergency. Valentina thought about Lieutenant Santos, now a squadron leader in her own right. About Lieutenant Thompson, who would return to combat operations with the knowledge that he could handle anything the sky threw at him. About all the young pilots who would follow, carrying forward the lessons learned in moments of crisis. When do I start? Tomorrow, if you're willing. But I have to warn you, this isn't a desk job. You'll be flying with every pilot you evaluate, pushing them to their limits in controlled conditions. It's dangerous work. Through her office window, Valentina could see an F-35 practicing touch-and-go landings on the test runway. The pilot was smooth and confident, each approach textbook perfect. But textbook perfect wouldn't save you when the hydraulics failed and the runway was 60 miles away. General, I didn't become a pilot to play it safe. I was hoping you'd say that. Welcome to the team, Ghost. The program launched 6 months later with a class of 12 pilots, 8 men and 4 women, all of whom had shown exceptional skill in training, but struggled with confidence issues in high-stress situations. Valentina called them her Phoenix Squadron, pilots who would rise from the ashes of their own doubts to become the next generation of combat leaders. The training was brutal, simulated emergencies that pushed both aircraft and pilots to their breaking points, night flights in impossible weather conditions, combat scenarios where failure meant not just a failing grade, but the theoretical loss of American lives. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Reaper Davis was the first to break. During a simulated close air support mission, she froze when presented with a target danger close to friendly forces. The hesitation lasted only 3 seconds, but in combat, 3 seconds could mean the difference between salvation and tragedy. "I can't do this," she said after the debrief, her voice hollow with defeat. "I'm not cut out for this kind of pressure." Valentina studied the young pilot's file. Reaper had graduated third in her class from Annapolis, earned her wings with distinction, and scored consistently high marks on every evaluation. On paper, she was everything the military wanted in a combat pilot. But paper couldn't measure the weight of responsibility that came with ordering death from above. "Tell me about your father," Valentina said quietly. The question caught Davis off guard. "Ma'am, your file says your father was killed in Iraq when you were 16. Marine Corps, right?" "Yes, ma'am. Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Davis. He died in Fallujah." "And you joined the Navy to honor his memory." "I wanted to make a difference, to protect other people's fathers from coming home in flag-draped coffins." Valentina nodded slowly. "That's a heavy burden to carry into combat. The need to be perfect, to never make the mistake that costs lives. But perfection is the enemy of action, Reaper. Sometimes you have to accept that good enough is good enough, and that hesitation kills just as surely as poor judgment." Over the following weeks, Valentina worked with Davis one-on-one, gradually building her confidence through progressively more challenging scenarios. They flew at dawn and at midnight in clear skies and violent thunderstorms, against targets that moved and disappeared and reappeared without warning. The breakthrough came during a simulated rescue mission. Davis was providing close air support for a downed pilot surrounded by enemy forces, the exact scenario that had caused her to freeze weeks earlier. This time, when the moment came to engage targets danger close to the pilot, she didn't hesitate. "Rifle, rifle, rifle," she called out, launching a precision Hellfire missile that eliminated the threat without endangering the friendly forces. After the simulation, Davis found Valentina in the hangar, tears streaming down her face. "I did it," she whispered. "I actually did it." "No," Valentina replied, placing a hand on the younger pilot's shoulder. "You became it. There's a difference." The Phoenix Squadron graduated 8 months later with a ceremony attended by senior officers from across the Air Force. All 12 pilots had not only passed the program, but emerged as leaders in their own right. They would go on to train the next generation, passing down the lessons learned in the crucible of doubt and determination. As Valentina watched her former students receive their certificates, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the broken pilot who'd lost her confidence in a training accident to the mentor who helped others find their own strength. The path had been neither straight nor simple, but it had led to something worthwhile. General Morrison joined her at the back of the ceremony hall, both women watching as the future of American air power received their recognition. "Any regrets about leaving test flying?" the general asked. Valentina watched Lieutenant Thompson, now Captain Thompson, shake hands with his new squadron commander. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd been tested and found worthy. "No, ma'am, this is exactly where I belong." "Good, because I have another assignment for you. The Air Force Academy wants to create a new course, Applied Combat Leadership. Someone who can teach cadets not just how to fly, but how to make impossible decisions under impossible pressure." It was a natural progression, Valentina realized. From combat pilot to mentor to educator. Each role building on the last, each generation of pilots carrying forward the lessons learned in moments of crisis. "When do I report?" "Fall semester. You'll have a class of 80 cadets, all of them convinced they're going to be the next Top Gun. Your job is to teach them that real heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and taking action anyway." That evening, Valentina called her mother in Denver. Katerina Kozlova had immigrated to America 30 years earlier, carrying nothing but dreams and determination. She'd worked 3 jobs to put her daughter through college, had stood proudly at her commissioning ceremony, and had never once questioned her decision to pursue a military career. Mama, I got promoted again, Valentina said in Ukrainian, the language of her childhood. Tell me in English, dear. I want to practice. I'm going to be a professor at the Air Force Academy, teaching young pilots how to be leaders. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When her mother spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Your father would be so proud. He always said you would change the world, one person at a time. The conversation lasted an hour, covering everything from career plans to the weather in Colorado. But as they were saying goodbye, her mother's voice grew serious. Valentina, you know you saved more than just those soldiers in Afghanistan, don't you? What do you mean, Mama? You saved yourself. And in saving yourself, you learned how to save others. That is the greatest gift a parent can give a child, the knowledge that they are strong enough to overcome anything. After hanging up, Valentina sat in her quiet apartment, surrounded by the accumulated artifacts of a military career. Citations and awards, photographs with fellow pilots, the folded flag from her father's funeral that had traveled with her to every duty station. But the most meaningful item sat on her desk, a simple thank you card from Lieutenant Santos, now Major Santos, commander of her own squadron. To the pilot who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Thank you for showing me who I could become. The Air Force Academy sat nestled in the Colorado foothills, its gleaming buildings and manicured grounds a testament to American military excellence. Valentina arrived on a crisp September morning, her car loaded with boxes of lesson plans and tactical manuals. She'd spent the summer developing curriculum that would challenge everything the cadets thought they knew about leadership and courage. Her first class was scheduled for 800 hours in Fairchild Hall. 80 third-year cadets filed into the auditorium, their uniforms immaculate, their bearing confident. They represented the best and brightest America had to offer, valedictorians and star athletes, class presidents and Eagle Scouts. But Valentina knew that academic achievement and natural talent meant nothing when bullets started flying. Good morning, cadets. I'm Colonel Kozlova, and for the next semester I'm going to teach you how to fail. The statement rippled through the room like a shock wave. These young men and women had never failed at anything significant in their lives. Failure was what happened to other people, to those who lacked the dedication and intelligence to succeed. How many of you believe you're going to be fighter pilots? She asked. 3/4 of the hands went up. How many of you think you have what it takes to lead men and women in combat? The same hands remained raised, joined by a few others. Good. Now, how many of you have ever made a mistake that could have killed someone? Every hand dropped. The auditorium fell silent. That's what I thought. You've been successful your entire lives, and that success has created a dangerous illusion that you're immune to failure, that good intentions and proper training will always be enough. Let me tell you about a morning in Afghanistan when that illusion nearly got 8 American heroes killed. She told them the story, but not the sanitized version that had become legend. She spoke about the fear that had gripped her in the cockpit, the doubt that had whispered she wasn't good enough, the weight of disobeying direct orders. She described the moment when she'd realized that 8 lives hung in the balance of her decision, and how that responsibility had been both crushing and liberating. Leadership isn't about being perfect, she concluded. It's about making imperfect decisions with incomplete information and living with the consequences. Some of you will make mistakes that cost lives. That's not a failure of character, it's the price of command. A cadet in the front row raised her hand. Ma'am, how do you live with that kind of responsibility? Valentina studied the young woman's face, earnest and determined, unmarked by the scars that came with real consequence. You accept that perfection is impossible and commit to being excellent anyway. You train until your responses become instinct. You study every lesson learned by those who came before you, and you trust that when the moment comes, you'll find a way to bring your people home. The semester flew by in a blur of case studies and simulation exercises. Valentina pushed her cadets through scenarios that had no perfect solutions, forced them to make decisions where every option carried unacceptable risks. She watched them struggle with the weight of command, saw some break under pressure while others discovered strength they'd never known they possessed. Cadet First Class Michael Chen was her biggest challenge. Brilliant and confident, he approached every problem like a mathematics equation, convinced that there was always a correct answer if you gathered enough data. During a simulated rescue operation, his obsession with perfect information led to analysis paralysis, while friendly forces took simulated casualties.